I'm Mike Bluehair, and this is my radio voice. No, actually, I don't really speak like that when I'm doing my strategic non-compliance podcast. I have a very special treat for me. That's right, a treat for me during this episode of Strategic Non-Compliance. I'm having my good friend Kif Davis of Multnomah County Cop Watch on the show. This is a pre-record, so Bunny Boots can just kind of let it roll and watch the frickin' chat rooms, because, well, our chats are kind of crazy. You know, both me and Bunny Boots don't censor shit, so it gets kind of nuts in there. So that will give Bunny Boots the opportunity to watch the blood sports in the chat rooms, because, you know, when we had Felipe Hemming on the episode before last, things kind of got off the hook. But anywho, to get back to my guest, Kif Davis, this is a guy whom I have loads of respect for. He's one of my best friends. I jokingly call his living room the library, because dude used to actually run and own his very own anarchist bookstore, and his place is like a lovely treasure trove of stuff that I like to thumb through and read. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Kif Davis of Multnomah County Cop Watch. Say hi to the people of Strategic Non-Compliance, Mr. Kif.
Hey everyone out there in radio and or internet, whatever the hell, man.
Yeah, it's an internet vloggy podcast thing. I don't even know what the hell to call it. Any of the who, Keith. So let's get right into it. The theme of the show is strategic non-compliance, and the idea is that I reach out to other people that are non-conformist and ask how they don't conform to the status quo. And I know your story, and you're one of the most subversive people that I've ever known in the time that I've been here in Portland. And let's describe Keith's childhood for the listenership, so we can understand how you were built to be the man you are today.
Well, it started out with my parents going to Woodstock, and they used to own head shops back on the East Coast in New Jersey and Philadelphia. And my dad used to have a poster company of subversive posters and other stuff. But my parents went to Woodstock, and then they conceived me at Woodstock on a bunch of high-grade LSD and hashish, and then I popped out in 1970.
So it would be safe to say that you're literally a counterculture baby.
Yep, definitely. I grew up in the countercultural environment, and I was brought directly from the hospital to back to the head shop within 24 or 48 hours or so after my mom gave birth to me.
Now, the head shop you're referring to was your home, right? You guys lived in the head shop as well?
No, my parents had a separate place where a separate
okay.
house they were partial owners of. And their head shop was called the Bird Cage, and that was in Ocean City, New Jersey. And there was also another head shop that they ran in Philadelphia called the Apple.
Right on. So the businesses were the Bird Cage and the Apple. Now, that's a nice place for us to start here. Now, in fiscal year 2014, police have stolen more property from U.S. citizens than all illicit crime combined, like all theft crime, all robberies, all home robberies, all muggings, all of it, by something called asset forfeiture seizure. And that's when the police have this 60-40 split with the federal government that monetarily incentivizes law enforcement to steal property away from people, and good luck getting it back when they take the property. But let's get into what happened to your parents' house back in the day.
I ordered up some weed from California for me and my mom, but mainly me because I smoked flagged by a narcotics task force in Orange County, California, and then they shipped the package onto where I was living at in Westminster, Maryland.
Now,
and,
this was one package, correct?
Yeah.
It wasn't like a drug operation or anything, correct?
What's up?
This was just one package, yes?
Yeah, it was a package with about an ounce and a half of weed.
Okay.
And, yeah, the police just sent it on to the other police agency down in Maryland from Southern California, where it was initially shipped from. And then a UPS guy basically delivered the package, but it was an undercover narcotics agent, which is UPS were the same agency that set off the whole Waco standoff and all that too. But and they did the exact same thing with UPS has had kind of a long history of allowing narcotics agencies and federal agencies to deliver various products and stuff. And,
So UPS will actually allow the law enforcement agencies to use their trucks and stuff to have these phony deliveries of packages and whatnot. And that's a good segue, too, because I've read in many of these, alleged bombing cases, not to go off on a tangent, but UPS will deliver, like, some fertilizer to someone's house, and they'll use that as an excuse to raid them. But, so UPS delivers this package, and what happens from there?
That set off a series of events. The Carroll County Narcotics Task Force, which is in Maryland and in Westminster, Maryland, which is probably about close to an hour outside of Baltimore. They came and they raided my house. They had like AR-15s and multiple officers. We lived on a farm that was a little over 50 acres, and I could see the police like barreling down the road towards my house, basically from and then I kind of knew why they were there. I had gotten a package delivered, and I kind of was kind of worried because the package actually took a day or so longer than it was scheduled to take. So I was kind of worried about the package in general. And then, after it got delivered, I opened up the package, I looked inside, and it said, if I remember correctly, the guy's name was Terry Todd, Orange County Narcotics Task Force. And I just saw this little post-it note on the package once I opened it up, which I'm sure the Narcotics Task Force in California were probably expecting that the Carroll County Task Force would at least open up the package and take that away, because that kind of...
Oh, that's ridiculous. It's kind of a dead giveaway.
Yeah, that kind of gave me, a little bit of a head start to know what's up before I saw the cops coming,
Uh-huh.
But, I actually called the number, too, that was provided on there, and they answered, and they're like, narcotics. And then, I was just like, oh, fuck, And then I saw the, police barreling down our road, and there was probably about 3 or 4 different vehicles. And
Now, what year was this?
this was in 1992.
Okay.
And I went and went onto the roof, actually, and I took the weed up onto the roof, And I also had about an ounce of some other stuff that wasn't quite as high quality as the stuff I was having delivered.
So, wait a minute. You're playing King of the Mountain with the drug task force on the roof as a young adult?
I basically ran up onto the roof.
With 2 ounces of pot.
I had to avoid them, you know, and hide out on the roof and stuff. So I was doing a really good job of it. And they might not have ever actually found me if I didn't come down on my own. But they were hassling my sister, and I could hear them screaming, like, "Where's your brother? Where's your brother?" and stuff like that, you know. And so I came down, but before I came down, I took the weed that was actually delivered to me, and I dropped that down a chimney of our house, which is was an older house, and this chimney went to a non-existent fireplace, and I actually had to retrieve the ounce and a half of weed that they delivered. I had to rent some power tools and chisel my way through part of the foundation to get to the actual weed, you know. But it was well worth it. So they never actually got the weed that they delivered. And then the other ounce of weed I actually started to eat it because I was kind of like trying to get stoned and also destroy the evidence, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, well, you know, good on you, you know. You got to put that big mouth of yours to good use, you know, and protect your family. So what ended...
It's really hard, though, choking down a whole ounce worth of weed on a roof.
I could only imagine.
Yeah.
So what happens to your family and your house and all that, you know, share with the audience.
Basically, they arrested my sister, too, but they, and this other girl, Claudia, that was living with us, who also helped run this store that my mom ran called Liberation, and I basically ran the book part of it and did the buying of all the books and all the underground comics and stuff like that.
So this was sort of an anarchist bookstore slash zine scene slash music venue, then?
Zines and underground comics, and also a bunch of underground books of various sorts, a lot of anarchist stuff, and all kinds of all different types of countercultural type books and stuff.
Okay. Now
you can find out if you just go online and just put Pamela Snow White Davis, the marijuana mama. You could look up her store was called Liberation.
Okay.
I kind of
Pamela Snowflake Davis.
Snow White.
Okay.
Pamela Snow White Davis, and Snow White is Snowhite, so it's just like one word, not two or whatever. But yeah. So and then they later arrested my mom too, and they basically immediately froze her assets to her business. She had a Guatemalan clothing import business too, on top of doing the Liberation bookstore head shop type thing. We sold a bunch of pipes, and we sold sterile hemp seeds and hemp clothing and a bunch of different stuff like that, you know.
Why would somebody want to buy sterile hemp seeds?
Oh, for the nutritional value and all that stuff, you know, just the...
Oh, I got you. For like the supplement aspect of it, okay.
It's basically has been used in bird feed too and stuff for a long time, so it's like, and it's pretty good too if you roast it up like popcorn and stuff like that. It's a pretty good little snack.
Right on. So they immediately seized your mom's bank accounts or monetary assets. What was the next step?
They seized her computers too, and my computers, and all the computers in the house, and so they basically effectively shut down my mom's entire business. She didn't know who owed her money, who was supposed to get orders or orders placed or anything. So it basically effectively shut down her business for about 6 weeks.
Okay, so at what point did they end up taking... Wait, hold on. Yeah, at what point did they end up taking your home from you and the 50 acres of property? When did that happen?
They didn't technically take it, but they were in the process of doing that. But basically, my mom won her appeal and all that. She got a really good lawyer, Billy Murphy. He's actually a lawyer who has actually portrayed himself on the HBO series The Wire. He also is the lawyer who got the family of Freddie Gray. He won that big multi-million-dollar settlement.
That's
recently.
the man. Now, Freddie Gray was the man that was given the rough ride by police and had his back broken, murdered. Yeah.
Yeah, up in Baltimore, and
okay.
So my mom went to prison over this and stuff too, and he was the one who got her out of prison, and he's also the person who won her appeal.
Now, what did they charge your mom with, and how long was she in prison?
They charged her with all kinds of stuff from, possession of marijuana to possession of marijuana with intent to distribute. She also was charged with some archaic law that is basically based in like running houses of ill repute and stuff like that, which is maintaining a common nuisance.
Wow. Okay, so the end result was that you guys lost your house and your business and the 50 acres, yes? Like, court.
Yeah, basically what happened was the fact that they seized her, seized her bank account and froze her bank account and all that stuff. She was unable to continue to pay the mortgage, and eventually it was getting put into it was going into bank foreclosure mode because we couldn't pay the amount of money that was
they were in process of
bank.
trying to take your stuff through asset forfeiture seizure this whole time, though, right?
What was that again?
Was the system trying to work through that process of asset forfeiture seizure to just take it outright at that point?
Yeah, they were working on seizing our house and stuff, but basically my mom won her appeal.
Okay.
And that kind of, and their case just started unraveling and other stuff, so they didn't, win. But basically they successfully sabotaged my parents' business and also, froze their assets so they couldn't run their business, and so basically what happened though was the person who my parents originally bought the house from, he came forward, and he was a pretty rich guy. I think he was actually like kind of like a heir to the DuPont family, if I remember correctly. It was like DuPont or Dow Chemicals. I can't remember which one. But he forward, and he paid the bank off. And then he basically allowed my parents to basically just pay him back once they sold the house. So they wound up selling their property, and I think their property is probably worth about $250,000. And they wound up, paying him off, and then being able to take out about $90,000 or $70,000 to $90,000 or so once they sold it. So it wasn't a total complete loss, but they're basically, totally sabotaged and forced to sell their place and almost lost it.
Wow. Like, I could imagine how that would, twist someone's mind and piss them off and just, make them just generally an angry person.
Then I wound up living in a studio apartment in Baltimore after that, from a 50-plus acre place with a really big house and stuff like that. So she definitely got downsized in her lifestyle,
Oh, yeah, I can imagine, man. So what next in your life?
Basically a lot of that stuff kind of infuriated me. But at that point, when this raid actually took place, I was doing a underground newspaper called Ship of Fools, and I basically printed up an average of 3,000 to 5,000 copies of each issue, and I used to send a lot of free copies to prisoners. Basically anyone who was a prisoner that wrote me and asked for a free subscription, I would send it to them.
So you were doing work like Anarchist Black Cross does, and mailing prisoners books that they could read to keep them from, losing all faith and hope in humanity while they're in prison, that kind of work?
Yeah, I was actually involved a lot in Anarchist Black Cross type stuff too, and I used to send books and correspond with a lot of different prisoners, and some which are still incarcerated, like Sundiata Acoli, and I used to write to a lot of the just various people from the Weather Underground, and just all kinds of different groups like that.
You ever write to any of the Black Panthers? Communicate with any of them? Like the old school Black Panthers from the 60s that were in prison, and some still...
Yeah, that guy that I just mentioned, Sundiata Acoli, I actually corresponded with him quite a bit and stuff, and sent him copies of my magazine and stuff.
Yeah,
and,
I wasn't sure, but I thought I recognized the name and as him being affiliated with the Black Panther Party for self-defense. That's why I jumped in there. So, after Ship of Fools, what next?
After that, I kind of, I moved to Baltimore myself. I started up this big warehouse thing. I started a distribution, basically, where I sold punk rock records and hardcore and stuff like that, and also sold a lot of anarchist books, and that was called Riotous Assembly.
Riotous Assembly, and that was a small music label and a anarchist bookstore, like mail order type thing?
Yeah, it was basically mail order, and I also had I did start a little bookstore in a property that I squatted and took over in Baltimore. I actually took over a couple places. I had a warehouse that I initially started renting out, but it upgrades on the place, but he never did. So I basically stopped paying rent and told him to fuck off, and then I was gonna just like continue to live there. And if he wanted to go to court, we could go to court.
Did you do it proper? And what I mean by that is establish squatters' rights and actually improve the property's value, and basically go by the numbers, like in a lot of these literatures that you can buy at anarchist bookstores to learn about squatters' rights. Did you do it that way, so you'd make yourself a legal pain in the ass to the guy if he tried to get you out?
Yeah, basically he was a pretty big slumlord, and his name was Harry Shapiro, and he owned, I think, like approximately 100 plus properties in Baltimore.
Yep.
So I basically told him, you know, like the warehouse we were in, it had no hot water, it had no heat, and I don't know if you've ever been to Baltimore in the winter, but it gets pretty cold.
Yeah, I've been through there. You could freeze to death very easily.
So we basically were living in total squalor to some degree with no heat and no hot water, and we basically, to keep warm, we all kind of just huddled in this one small walled-off room and had a space heater going all the time, and also used the toaster oven to toast up food, and also to worm our hands in too sometimes.
Oh, wow. So, you ended up taking over that building.
Yep, and we also went around and explored a lot of other abandoned buildings, and we went into a couple places too. Like this one place probably had 150 rooms or so, and we wound up doing some stuff there. And my one friend, he wound up squatting there basically by himself, and he was just a block or so away, but him and this other guy actually started growing weed in this abandoned building too.
Of course your friends would be doing that. Okay, so let's fast forward into Oregon and when I met you, because we've pretty much established you at this point as living a life well beyond the beaten path. You know, your first punk rock concert was what, age 9?
No, I kind of got into stuff around age 8 or 9, kind of when the Sex Pistols and
okay,
you know, the first waves of punk bands were coming out, the Ramones.
So then maybe your first show was closer to 12?
What's up?
Your first show was then maybe closer to 12 then?
Yeah. My first punk show was actually like TSOL played at Tower Records out in Laguna Niguel, and they did a free show out there.
Nice. Okay, so yeah, so you know, as far as
kind of evolved into a little mini riot of some sort. Not really a riot, but a big scuffle with the police, because the members of TSOL, they were playing in the back parking lot area in the Laguna Niguel, Laguna Hills, El Toro, where the Tower Records was, in the back parking lot, and a bunch of the members of TSOL started throwing cans of beer out to the audience midway through their set, you know?
Nice.
And, you know, there was a lot of kids in the audience, too. Like, you know, I was probably approximately 12 years old or something like that, you know?
I can imagine little Keith. Okay,
When that happened, the police were there on guard waiting to strike, and as soon as that happened, the cops I was involved in quite a few punk rock riots back in the day, because probably an average of 25% of the shows or whatever would either be like a little mini riot or full-blown, police just beating the hell out of people, which you could more call a police riot. One of the worst things, that I ever saw as a kid was the Dead Kennedys played a show at the Longshoremen Memorial Hall, and that just turned into, they played in this area that was primarily Mexican and stuff, and there was a lot of Mexican gang members, and they kind of like flipped out that a bunch of punk rock kids were in their neighborhood, and they wound up attacking the show. And they busted through the doors, and it kind of broke out into a really big brawl between, this was in like 1983, and you could look it up online. There's DOA played, and Sim 34, and the Minutemen, and
Dead on Arrival, wonderful.
It was like a really, really good show, but DI played too. There was quite a few bands that played that night, but you can look it up if you put like Dead Kennedys, Wilmington, California, Longshoremen's Memorial Hall. You could find out, but it totally just turned into a big old brawl where.
Yeah, so there's been cops pretty much up your ass your entire life, right?
Oh yeah, like basically my parents, their store was targeted by the police. Like they had head shops, and they basically were under constant surveillance by the police, and they also had a lot of problems with the police. The police would come into their store almost daily and rip down posters they didn't like straight off the walls, and my parents would just go to the back and go grab another poster and replace the one that just got ripped down. But so yeah, my whole life I've definitely, at least my family has been under the gun of the police and other stuff, and that's one of the reasons I do a lot of the stuff I do, and because I've the system's left a bad taste in my mouth since I was a kid. I was actually told by my parents, to not pledge allegiance to the flag, so I've never actually pledged allegiance to the flag ever in my entire life once,
Well, that's wonderful, because the Pledge of Allegiance was actually created by a socialist who wanted to wrap collectivist ideas and a collectivist tyrannical ideology around jingoistic sounding language. It was actually, his name was, I think it was Francis Bellamy, or I know his last name was Bellamy, but back in the day when they created the pledge, they actually had children salute with their left hand, and they would hold their hand out just like the Nazi salute, which I find interesting. But political ideology, that's a good place to start. But if you Google the Bellamy salute, you'll find pictures, black and white pictures of school children saluting our flag, the same way that Hitler had people salute the swastika with their hand out. But anywho, would you self-describe yourself as an anarchist?
Yeah, I've basically called myself an anarchist since I was about 9 years old. But I don't know, these days, a lot of the people who call themselves anarchists are pretty pathetic, and,
they're pretty much leftist, waving black flags, in my opinion. They're pretty much ultra-left, politically correct.
worldwide, because there is still a lot of strong anarchist movements, and I probably would be more prouder to call myself an anarchist if I lived in a country or a region that where the waters of anarchism haven't been so muddied, and I've had anarchists get pissed off at me for criticizing people that are fond of President Obama.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I have to agree with you, Keith, just quickly.
Person about how Obama is waging war and killing black and brown people around the world.
Sure. And I
people that call themselves anarchists, and then they get mad at you because you're talking to a person of color about Obama. It's like this just goes down such a road of identity politics that it's just ridiculous, So,
yeah, and I have to agree with you. And you said that the waters have been muddied for anarchism in America for the most part, and I agree. And would you not agree that most of the anarchists in the United States are basically leftists waving black flags? Like,
yeah, or at least a good portion of them. They can't. I don't know, a lot. There's a lot of people that are actually anarchists that don't really even use that term anymore just because they don't want to really be associated with a lot of the people that do call themselves anarchists, because they see the water's been so muddied, and the whole what is passing for the anarchist movement in America has just been so watered down. And
yeah, I mean, nobody does it like the Greeks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's a lot of just reactionary authoritarians that are I would classify them closer to like Maoists than anarchists, but they seem to want to call themselves anarchists.
Well, yeah. Well, a lot of the confusion, I think comes from the anarcho-socialist or the anarcho-communist derivation, where they go by the conquest of bread, or by Peter Kropotkin, or the Prince Peter Kropotkin, that came up with anarcho-communism, and that's the literary work that seems to be looked at as the Bible by the majority of anarchists that lean in a left direction, or they call themselves anarchists. And my primary confusion with that is that, communism is a form of government, so, it's a little weird for me. I understand Kropotkin. I've read Conquest of Bread, I've read his Mutual Aid and all that stuff, and it's 100 years old, and anarchism needs to evolve, beyond the machinations of, turn of the century people. A good example of anarchism evolving would be, anarcho-libertarian or ANCAP or voluntarism. Basically, people that don't want anything to do with the government, and they want to run their own businesses. They want to create their own currencies. They want to start founding their own banks and their own means of exchange, so they don't have to be squatted on by government. And I think that's an interesting evolution of anarchism. But, but then on the other hand, there's a lot of people that call themselves anarcho-capitalist, and they're basically, or voluntarist, and a lot of them are basically like Republicans wearing fedoras saying, hey, I bought a bunch of Bitcoin and that makes me an anarchist, and that's kind of bullshit too,
Yeah, and a lot of them are nationalists and even white supremacists and all kinds of stuff. So
yeah, and claim to be ANCAPs, but they're not. You're very right. A lot of them are just white nationalists trying to, co-opt an idea or a meme. But
yeah, that's pretty much usually what happens with most good ideas or most subcultures. They all get co-opted and taken over. And actually, a lot of the a lot of the anarchist stuff back in the early 90s, it kind of got taken over a lot by, like groups like the RCP, the Revolutionary Communist Party, who are now recently...
yeah, the RevComs, they're comical as hell, man, when they show up at protest with their little, hammers and sickles and stuff. And, like, if you read their manifestos, it's so retarded. Like, RevComs are laughable.
And they're the same people that started up that Refuse Fascism thing, and which is basically just the RCP, the Revolutionary Communist Party, trying to take over the whole and cash in on a lot of the Antifa type of stuff and the anti-fascist resistance type stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you, and that's my consensus on how that worked. And, what I've been watching with this, let's get into the whole Antifa versus alt-right thing. What I've been seeing happening is two authoritarian groups that are basically vying for the right to take over the street. I've seen some vile, egregious stuff done on the Antifa side, and I've seen some really stupid, violent, vile, egregious stuff done on the alt-right side. And it's basically, they're both authoritarian groups. They're just extreme left and extreme right. Would you not agree with that idea there, Keith?
Yeah, basically, it seems like at this point, a lot of the people that are calling themselves Antifa or whatever a lot of them are actually the, RCP and Maoist and communist and socialist. And I've talked to kids in ski masks, and some of them are like, oh, I'm actually like, I more consider myself like a liberal Democrat more than anything. So it's kind of like the whole, Antifa movement, for the most part, it used to be more radicals and people that would target actual real Nazis and stuff.
Yes.
And it seems like, every conservative or everyone who voted for Trump is a Nazi or whatever. I'm not a fan of any president, and I think Trump is a fascist piece of shit and other stuff, but...
Oh, agreed.
I also like to put things in perspective and realize that a lot of voters just vote for candidates over one issue or another. So,
sure.
A lot of people that might have voted for Trump, they might have voted for Trump just because they're into gun rights or liked a couple of his talking points or didn't want to...
I want to weigh in here for a second, Keith.
They should file B,
Yeah, here are my thoughts. Like, by any empirical analysis, the United States is a fascist country. Bush Sr., Bush Jr., Carter, Reagan, Ford, since 10 years before my life and 10 years after I'm dead, you can be rest assured that we live in a fascist country. Obama, for instance, got more money donated to his presidential campaign by Wall Street than any other president in American history. That is the very definition of fascism, is when corporations work with the government. And we have like literally thousands of government entities that are all public-private partnerships, like Amtrak, for instance. Amtrak couldn't survive if it didn't get massive government subsidies that were taken by the theft of taxation. Therefore, Amtrak is a fascist entity. And so on through all the, the Bureau of Land Management owns more territory in the United States than any other group. So government has seized more land than in any other entity. We have the corporation, which is the dominant entity and institution in our lives, and there's this constant revolving door between people that have a high office in government and people that have a high office in corporations, and it's like they're just playing musical chairs. you know, basically, they make public our debt through this system. Like the national debt is made public somehow. Like we all are supposedly debt holders that own it, and then what we make gets privatized. What we produce gets taken into the private sector. So it's fascistic by its very nature. And when I see Antifa or extreme leftists fighting extreme rightists, I see basically two management teams vying for the CEO job of Slavery Incorporated. And you know, I just find it kind of stupid and silly, you know, and I agree with you. I was doing Antifa shit, you know, as a teenager and a young adult before it was cool. You know, I was going to like Hammerskin shows with groups of punk rockers and windowless 70s rape vans, and we'd jump out and beat up some bona fide neo-Nazis. You know, people say that if you have a Trump hat nowadays that you're a Nazi, or if you're you know, anti-immigration, you're a Nazi. No, I think that if you have a Trump hat and you're you know, anti people coming across these imaginary borders, you're just politically stupid. I'm not going to attack you. I might point and laugh and say you're stuck in this whole right-wing kind of ideology, but it's absolutely ridiculous that they use the word Nazi so much when they call these people on the right, these people that are just bought into the right side of politics, that the word Nazi doesn't even have a meaning anymore. You know, these SJWs.
I mean, I'm a Jew, and I'm an anti-racist, and I've done a lot of the same stuff too, you know, fought against, you know, Nazis and skinheads back in the 80s and the 90s and other stuff, and I usually can't get away, you know, without being called a Nazi or alt-right almost like once or twice weekly, and it's usually by some stupid dumbass in their 20s or something like that, or some, you know, socially engineered college student that doesn't know shit about politics, that's fresh off their mama's tit or whatever, and going into permanent debt slavery or whatever, unless their parents are paying for it, to be socially engineered to be stupid and to just fall for total identity politics and everything. I mean, nowadays, basically, you can, you know, have a leader like Obama that just goes and invades every black and brown country in the world and bombs the hell out of them. And basically, all the Democrats and the majority of the people won't even say anything about it. And that's basically what I've come to term as like weaponized equity, where you put people in places of power that are from a marginalized community, and then basically, you know, you use them to do your dirty work for the white power structure and all the bankers and the oligarchs, and then anyone who has anything bad to say about them or called a racist or a bigot or
right. You can't criticize a black person no matter what they do because of this SJW kind of mentality. And case in point, let's look at what happened during Obama's presidency. He never met a wedding party or a funeral he didn't like to drone. I mean, this guy killed you know, 30, 40, 50 people at a time at funerals, at weddings. And no one on the left said anything. And it's because of that identity politics stuff. I mean, he was the perfect vehicle for Wall Street, Madison Avenue, and the military-industrial complex to fuck over Africa because he was black. And then anybody who would criticize him would be called a racist. You know, and I think what you said is very important, weaponized equity. If you look at, you know...
It's kind of just the optical view of things, you know. I mean, it does look better from an optical viewpoint for someone that is a person of color to invade all the black and brown countries compared to a white guy, or, you know, but that's actually why I thought Hillary Clinton would be the president, so they could keep the schedule of invasions going, and you know, it's not quite as good as having a black president, but if you at least have a white woman, that might be a little better than just having the white guy invading all the Middle Eastern and
sure. And I don't want to just bag on Obama because, I mean, as we clearly established, you know, all the right-wing presidents in our lifetime were also fascist, you know.
I don't even think that presidents really are in control at all, barely. I think they're just following script and taking orders from the intelligence community and the bankers and the globalists and all the corporations and all the fascists and stuff, and basically they have a script. And, you know, I think that Trump, you know, he's a total lunatic and a shitbag and all this other stuff, but I think he's just following script, and I don't think he's as independent as...
Wait, Keith, your phone is breaking up. Can you move?
He's the man of the people or whatever. He's just a man doing it on his own, and he's got his own opinions and his own agendas, and I don't see that at all. I see him as someone that's just following script, just like Obama or whoever. And I mean,
sure,
as long as this country exists, we've always had presidents, and I think basically during the Reagan-Bush presidency is when we really just turned into a nation of actor presidents, you know, and basically everything's just been totally scripted in a big bad political satire shit reality that's just been totally scripted by intelligence agents at this point, you know.
Yeah. Now, I would totally agree. Every presidential administration is basically an amalgamation of all the favors and payoffs and debts that they accumulated as they were running for president. And so there's always, you know, a couple hundred people standing behind every president, and those are the ones pulling the strings. Totally agreed on that point. Let's segue into Multnomah County Cop Watch and your cop watching activity and that kind of stuff. Why did you form Multnomah County Cop Watch, and what's the point? Why should people film police in public? Why should they be documenting police behavior?
Every once in a while you catch them doing something really bad, and, you know, that's always good to bring light to that type of stuff. But I actually think that cop watching, in reality, a lot of the I don't believe that there's much police accountability. So I kind of drift away from a lot of the same things. Like, I'm looking for police accountability because I don't believe in police accountability. I don't believe that the police will ever be accountable. They have, like, police unions and all this other stuff, and, you know, like, in Portland we have Nazi Mark Kruger, who's erected shrines to fallen SS soldiers in public parks, and he's in charge of the Vice Squad, and he's also in charge of approval of all informants in every bureau in Portland.
Sure. So just quickly, so people,
for the most part, but I do believe with a camera that you can kind of shut down a lot of stuff, and, you know, it's just like a camera with anything. You know, if your neighbors were arguing and you went into their place, you know, and you were filming them, they might behave differently. So I think the camera is more a deterrent for the police to actually more stick to how they're supposed to be policing and not go overboard, or to just basically, you know, ignore the situation. Like, well, there's cameras here. We don't need to be under the scrutiny of the camera. This isn't that big of a deal. Let's just leave, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree, but, like, I have to tell people at home that just go, when you mentioned the Nazi cop in Portland, Mark Kruger, people just needs to Google Nazi cop, Portland, Oregon, Mark Kruger, and you can read all these lovely articles. We have a bona fide Nazi fetishist running our drugs and vice division here in Portland. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Keith. Keep going. So you were saying that it's better. It's basically better, and I agree, to convict police in the court of public opinion, creating public ire against the police, you know, exposing them for what they are, because the camera is such a ubiquitous tool in 21st century America that we may as well film them and convict them in the court of public opinion. I mean, I want police to be made irrelevant in the future, but in order for that to happen, it's got to be brought into mainstream culture, and cop watchers and activists have to break that perception as if though cops are here to protect us, and they're these special people that lay down their lives and risk their lives every day to protect us, and all this other bullshit that's spoon-fed to us through the corporate media, through the TV shows, through the way that the news basically fillets authority every time the police are involved. And I agree with you. I'm not a reformer of police by any stretch of the imagination. I'm more of an abolitionist. I believe that they should be done away with eventually. But so we're on the same page in that regard, Keith.
Yeah, one of the things I do too is that I do have a lot of personal conversations with police when I'm out filming too, and I kind of just tell them, the way you could do your job better is to just ignore a lot of stuff and to just move on. Just be like, this isn't worth my time or anyone's time, and go do some policing of some real crime. Like, don't harass this guy who's homeless. Just, if you see some people drinking in the doorway, just drive past them. Just ignore a lot of stuff, because they have the option to ignore stuff. It's not something that they have to police everything they see. They have the option to just ignore a lot of stuff.
Sure, they have what's called discretion, and I agree. I mean, if there's no real victim, if the person's not hurting anybody else, the police should take a back seat and leave people alone, just like anybody else. If I see somebody doing something that somebody else might not agree with, if they're not hurting anybody, it's none of my business. And I wish that law enforcement would, adhere to the non-aggression principle, the whole live and let live, unless somebody's, stealing from or attacking you, or attacking someone you love, or stealing from your family, like, leave them alone.
Yep, they'd actually get a lot more respect from the community if they did that, and they would actually have a lot easier job. And they wouldn't make themselves as big a targets as they do, too, And they'd be, if cops just went around arresting rapists, child molesters, and murderers, and, doing real policing of real predators and real criminals, then I don't think that people would have that big of a problem with a lot of the police,
I totally agreed. We're down to our last 2 minutes, Keith. I want you to tell people on the interweb where they can find your media and your stuff, and then do you have any final words for the lovely people listening?
You could find me on Twitter, Multnomah County Cop Watch. You could find me on Facebook. I have a page and also a Facebook group on there, and that's pretty much, and I have a YouTube channel. I haven't really uploaded much for a while, but I'm kind of working on
the Street Fighter PDX YouTube channel.
What's up?
Is it the Street Fighter PDX?
No, I have a Multnomah County Cop Watch YouTube channel, and I do a lot of stuff on Twitter and stuff like that too, as far as just posting articles and other stuff. But yeah, this whole chief outlaw thing, getting stalking orders on cops and stuff, and that's kind of become the new reality is in Portland, Oregon. That basically we're getting stalking orders put on us for filming the police and public officials, and I got a stalking order put on me from attending a city council meeting.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, what's going on with you and, you know, Eli is just really crazy, and how they're doing that. And I would love to have you on and interview you about how you've been given a stalking charge by a public official in Portland, Oregon, and it's ridiculous. And the charges against Eli, son of Hightower, are also ridiculous. It's basically saying that we no longer have a right, according to U.S. law and whatnot, to petition government for redress of grievance. Not that I give a shit about law, but
Ed Wheeler's a total fascist, and he ran on this platform of police accountability, but then he likes to, you know, let his chief get stalking orders put on cop watchers, and also, you know, members of city council staff get stalking orders put on cop watchers, and you know, Bob and Chris Ponte, they got a stalking order put on them by Mark Kruger,
the Nazi cop Mark Kruger. Okay, so yeah, it's something that's been disheartening me, Keith, is the fact that we have, you know, our public officials here in Portland, Oregon, in uniform, armed, claiming that they're afraid of someone asking them a question with a camera, and the courts are just going ahead and signing off on this, and it really is egregious. And I was going to end the show, but I'm going to run it for another 10 more minutes so we can talk about this. It's chilling, and it's literally having a chilling effect on our ability to, you know, just observe law enforcement in public. And Eli being given that stalking order, and you being given a stalking order for just speaking, you know, basically, it's legal in Oregon to challenge someone to go to a boxing gym if you want. Like, and that's basically what you did. Can you tell me what happened with you?
Yeah, what happened with that was I was in City Hall and at the city council meeting, and I came out into the hallway, and Nick Fish, his policy advisor and his senior policy advisor, James Dunphy and Jim Blackwood Jr., came out and confronted me in the hallway and said, "Aren't you a sex offender?" Which I'm not. Anyone can look up my name. David Kif Davis, born June 30th, 1970, and see that the only charges I've ever had are related to protesting and TriMet fair violations and weed. So, you know, I basically exchanged a bunch of words with them, told them to fuck off, and called them a bunch of pieces of shit, and all this other stuff, and then I left City Hall, and then a couple weeks later, I saw both those guys. I saw Jim Blackwood Jr. first, and I said, "Hey, what's up, fuckface?" And then walked past him, and then I saw James Dunphy, and I started talking some crap to him, and I said, you know, there's a whole nother way we could handle this, you know, if you want to, like, slander me and call me a fucking sex offender and all this stuff and make up fucking stories about me and other stuff. I was like, there's a whole nother legal way we can handle this, and it's called a boxing gym. I didn't threaten him like, let's go out back right now and handle this, punk. I didn't pull a Joe Biden, you know, like Joe Biden earlier, I think it was today or a couple days ago, actually said, you know, if Joe Biden and Trump were in school together, he would have taken him out back and beat the fuck out of him or whatever, you know?
Yep.
So I basically, Biden said, you know, if I went to school with Trump, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him, which is something that just came out in an article that someone sent me, which they sent me the article and said, Joe Biden taking a page from your book.
Oh, funny.
But
yeah, but to get back to it, it's totally legal to challenge somebody to go into a boxing gym in Oregon if they consent.
Yeah, and you know, I wasn't even wasn't necessarily trying to box him or anything. I just put it out on the table and said, hey, you want to know what? Fuckface, if you want to handle this a whole different other legal way, there's a thing called the boxing gym, and we can go there if you want, you know?
And with that, he bitches out and gets a stalking order placed against you because he didn't like your reaction to him calling you a pedophile. I mean, what did he expect someone to do? Warm up to them and be best buds when they publicly call you a kid fucker? I mean, that's disturbing.
Yeah, and so basically what he did was he came out and he baited me. He knows I'm not a sex offender. The thing is his boss, Nick Fish, worked for Barney Frank, who ran a brothel out of his house. And Barney Frank also was implicated in the child abduction of Johnny Gosh. He was also hired a bunch of male prostitutes as his congressional aides. And that's where Nick Fish got his jump off in his career. Nick Fish is a little Harvard rich boy, little fuck boy from Harvard, you know? Just like our mayor, Ted Wheeler, another rich boy, Harvard fuck boy.
A neo-fascist, neoliberal fascist, fascist with a smiley face is how they run our city here in Portland.
Neoliberal fascist pigs.
Yep.
But it's just really sick. And, Ted Wheeler said he ran on a platform of police accountability. And what does he do? He gets
a transplant from Oakland, California, to be our police chief.
From Oakland, one of the most brutal and oppressive police forces. But, he's like, we got a black woman from Oakland. So that's my big contribution, is I'm going to give you a black woman. So it's basically like his little trying to be progressive, but it's all just an optical illusion because he's this career law enforcement person that has been involved in law enforcement since she was in high school. She started out a police cadet.
Right.
And the Oakland police, they had the whole child sex trafficking scandal that they were running out of the Oakland PD. A bunch of cops got busted for pimping out a underage girl out of her department. And we have some of the highest levels of child sex trafficking going on right here in Portland, Oregon. So what does Ted Wheeler do? Let's go to one of the most brutalist, oppressive police regimes in the country that happen to be running a child prostitution ring out of it, and let's hire this lady, And then one of the first things she did when she gets into office is get this stalking order put on one of the only black cop watchers in the area, Eli Ritchie, who's son of Hightower on YouTube. But, just like I was saying about the whole weaponized equity, I was criticizing the fact that Chief Outlaw and this other black female judge, Adrienne Nelson, who granted the stalking order on Eli, who's a black cop watcher, I was talking crap about them and how they're a bunch of fascists and violating the Constitution and all this other stuff. And then I had some local social justice warriors come in and call me a racist and a misogynist because I'm talking about a black cop watcher getting totally fucked by two black women. So that makes me a racist, misogynist, you know.
Well, that's how that stuff works. That's how it greases the fascistic wheels of tyranny, is that you're not allowed to criticize somebody because of the color of their skin, no matter what they do. And that's what makes it so very, very dangerous. You know, I think people should be judged on the content of their character and their actions. People should be judged on the content of their character and their actions, not, you know, given oppression points because of their gender or their color, and then, oh, well, you can't contradict that person because of they meet these tick boxes in categorization. It's absolutely ridiculous.
And in Portland, you know, there's only a 6% of the population is black, so basically, you know, it's kind of like people don't know around here what it's like to live in most places in America where there actually is a black population, you know? They have so much white guilt, and they're just so brainwashed that they'll actually believe stuff like that. Like, if you criticize anyone of color, you're a racist, or you're only doing it because you're a bigot.
I've seen that so much, Keith. I've seen it at protests where somebody was disagreeing with somebody that happened to be black, and protesters will surround them and yell at them and say, are you talking over a person of color? Like, because you can't disagree with them.
People will have no problem talking to a black person who's more of the Trump conservative thing and calling them Nazis and yelling at them and talking over them. So it's like identity politics, like, just flies out the window unless they fall in line with their exact political spectrum. It's just like a really bad cartoon show. That's why I kind of just stay. All I do at a lot of these, you know, the right versus left little protests and Joey Gibson events and all this other stuff, I just kind of film it all and look at it as a bad cartoon that needs to be recorded and be, you know, documented for historical and...
Well, I do have to end the show now, Keith, because it's been over an hour, and thanks for coming on. That was a lot of fun. That little stroll down memory lane, and the you know, giving people on the interweb a little peek into, you know, Portland, the shit show of Portland politics. Has been a lot of fun, but thank you so very much, Keith, for being on, and I would like to invite you to come on another time and do another hour with me if you could.
Right on. I'd advise people to stay away from Portland because it's a really bad cartoon here, and it's better to watch, you know, like some really bad cartoons on TV that you can just turn off and instead of jump into this bad cartoon of Portland.
All right, man. Bye.
Right on. Cool. Have a good day, man.
Yeah, you too, brother.